So I'm not sure if anyone had a chance to read the blog that I sent around what Sue Dexter had done with her home. She's going to be presenting first for sort of 15 minutes or so. If you have questions that can wait, it might be better to hold them till the end. And then Bob will follow after that. Sue, I don't actually know enough of your background to give you a good introduction other than what you've already shared. So maybe I'll just pass it over to you and then.
Well, you don't have to know much more other than I went back to university in 1990 as an adult, mature, to study trees. And I have been, I guess, all my life a kind of environmental person. And here's what happened. It's kind of an interesting process. I'll take you through the process a little bit. We had the idea of doing net zero. I went to Mike Layton and said, we want to do a geothermal community. And that we tried that. We went over, Transform TO was doing some meetings. I was in a meeting that should really encourage everybody. Rainy night, cold, nasty night, down south of the St. Lawrence market. And there was a tent there, a temporary tent that they were using for this meeting. And there were probably 300 people at the meeting. It was packed. And so we had discussion of this and discussion of that, and houses do this and thing, and 80% are furnaces and blah, blah. At the end of the meeting, the facilitator said to the people, and this was a very mixed crowd, very few my age, mostly in their 20s, 30s, 40s, it looked to me. And the audience was asked at the end of the meeting, did they think it had been an excellent meeting? And I thought, based on the vibrancy of the place, it had been fabulous. So I put up my hand. I was the only person to put up my hand. So I was a bit surprised by that. Then they said, did you think it was a so-so meeting? And then about 5 people put up their hand. Did you think it was a bad meeting? I thought, what's bad? We got 300 people on the worst night of the year. Really a nasty, nasty night. They wanted more. And that was the real kickoff for me on this round, which was, how do you do a net zero? So I started going to the Transform TO meetings. They've got a lot of material there. They basically provided the backup that Bob can give you, which is not the backup. I can't give you technical stuff, but I can tell you exactly what happens, nuts and bolts. I drew the assignment from the Net Zero Committee to look into furnaces, because furnaces are the bang for the buck. That's where the fossil fuels are in your houses. And so I was on the stairs. Atlas Kerr had come to look after my furnace. I said, how old's the furnace? He said, 15 years. I said, how old's the air conditioner? He said, 15 years. I said, when do they start to go south? He said, now. I said, okay. And he said, but don't worry. We'll put a gas one in a nanosecond. You'll get it by the end of the day when your furnace breaks. And I said, no, I won't. And he looked at me like I was from Mars. And I said, there will be no gas in my house for a furnace. I will not have gas. Well, then it turned out the technology that we're talking about is actually quite old technology. And the young guys don't know, they're not putting in enough of them yet to have that be top of mind. I think Bob would confirm that. So I start out and I say, okay, I want to have a heat pump. I don't want to have a gas top up because the heat pump only goes down a certain to -20 or something. And you need a bit of a top up if in case the frigid weather comes. So I decided to do competing contracts, bids. And in both cases, the companies the furnace companies were encouraging me to do, if I wouldn't do a fossil fuel gobbler, I should do a hybrid. And I said, there will be no gas in my house. So they looked at me like I was nuts. And then they started to look at the house. And here's where the rubber hits the road a little bit. I live in a 2.5 story Victorian house. It was leaky as could be. I did through time, I insulated the basement, got some banks for the buck and a bit of money back on an Enercan program 10 years ago. I've replaced windows. I did a full renovation with probably not as much wall insulation as could have been. I've caulked all the windows. I'm a pretty good critter in a Victorian house. So there's and in the course of dealing with a Victorian house, when we started our retrofit project, the hole in the wall that was represented by air leaks was, I think, 17 inches square. So it was though you had a window open. The leaks through the walls and windows and ceilings and up whatever else the house is built of represented an opening in a wall that was 17 inches square. So it's just the cool air is going out in the summer and the hot air is going out in the winter. So almost anything you do to a Victorian house is to your advantage. First thing, I said to the guys, okay, we want to do a heat pump. And he said, oh, the heat pump's really tall. And we started looking for places to put it. And we live on very tight properties. So I was going to lose my back porch if I put it there. It was going to be above windows here and there, in the front of the house, it would be higher than the front windows. And it couldn't go there because I have the gas line comes in. So there's practical stuff on where you can situate the outside unit of the heat pump, because it comes in 2 units. There's the outside that does magic and makes hot, cold, and cold, hot. And then that gets transferred through a pipe into a unit inside, which has the blower in it, and Bob will tell you what else is in the inside. So there's the black box inside, there's the outside unit, and it has to be tall enough to get away from snowfall. So it's raised, and the guy from Bellier said, well, why don't we put it on the wall? I said, great, I've got a blank section of wall toward the back of my house. Let's put it up on the wall, feed the line through the wall, through the basement to the box in the basement. Then there was a situation where the box in the basement was taller than my ceiling in the basement. All houses, old houses, have different configurations in the basement. So they got an old guy in from Bellier, and he said, put it on the ceiling. It weighs 125 pounds, this black box. And Sarah, I sent you, I've sent you some pictures of it. Mm-hmm. So let's put it up on the ceiling. I said, fine. Then they looked at my electrical panel and they said, oh, you haven't upgraded your electrical panel. And I said, oh, well, no, I haven't, because I didn't need it. I didn't think, well, you do now. So Bellier sent around an electrician. He brought me up to 200 amps. I also want an induction stove, because I will not cook with I get quite rigid about these things. I won't cook with gas. It pains me to cook with gas. So so they had to run a wire to the stove, and it's ready to go when the induction stove I've ordered arrives. The issue for me was I felt an awful lot better as a person if I spent an extra $5,000 probably on the heat pump over a fossil fuel. I couldn't live with myself knowing there was an option. So I said, okay, what's $5,000 over 15 years life of this machine? And the answer is it's really not all that much. And you're doing something for the planet, and you're helping other people. If you go first, they'll come on behind. And then you'll start to really bite in an individual level. You'll start to bite into reducing greenhouse gases. One of the things that I think is really important is that there's difficulty in adapting a new system. It's not an easy transfer, in other words, but once they get it in their heads how they're going to do it, it becomes basically, I think it was probably 2 days to remove the old furnace, put in the new one, suspend it from the ceiling, 125 pounds. And the operating cost was unknown to me. Bob has numbers on operating costs. And it's only been established through this couple of months. The difference in operating the machine over fossil fuels is $9.45 over 3 months. So it's actually costing me $3 a month running costs to do, and that means these are very, very efficient machines. I had various options. I could have gone for ducted, or I could do ductless. Ducted fits into your existing system as a regular furnace does. The ductless are in units on the wall, and they're very efficient as well. I've got one on the 3rd floor because my 3rd floor gets really hot in the summer, and it air conditions the whole house because cold air falls. But I have too many rooms really to allow. I'd have to have different units in all the rooms. That, like, I've got 2 rooms of floor and two floors with 2 rooms, and then the 3rd floor would be a different one. So I elected for the central system. It's been great. It works great. I also have in the house, and I put in 2007, an electrical system, a photovoltaic system, solar panels, and I have trees in my backyard. You know, the operating time of these solar installations is in the height of the summer. You're not going to get much. When the sun is low in the sky, you don't get much production, even without leaves getting in the way. So what you have is, you actually can have trees. I've got a couple of birch trees in my backyard, and they go up higher than the solar panels, which are, I've got a 3-story house in front and then a flat roof in back, and the rear and the wall up there, the roof is south facing. We've done in the neighborhood, we've done east-west houses. They'll put the panels along east-west. And that system has been operating very successfully since 2007. It cost me $30,000 to put in. The same system today would cost about $12,000. which is exactly what Sarah's talking about, is the more people that get in, the lower the price. I put in the solar hot water and love it. My gas bills in summer were $3.45 for gas. I mean, I just wasn't, I don't have a gas bill in the summer because I'm getting all my water heated from the sun. And so the hot water comes down from the roof, or the glycol comes down and is stored in a tank in the basement. And then that's the preferential source for your hot water in the house. And you top up with an on-demand heater, which only goes on as is necessary. And even in the depth of winter, the city water, I think, comes in around 40 degrees, and I'm rarely less than 60. So I've got I have a pickup, I have an advantage, a thermal advantage in the winter of about 20 degrees, where the sun does, even in the coldest weather, with pipes going exterior in the house. You know, they're running down the side of the house. They're insulated, but you know, they've got that kind of rubbery insulation that the squirrels like. So anyway, so that's my story. It's been a great journey, and getting connected to the sun and to the seasons is it's a miraculous thing, actually. The best day of my life was when that film crew arrived with the solar panels. I have never done anything that was as pure as that in my life. So that's my story. So I'm thrilled. The electrical cost about $5,000, I think.
Yeah, are you posting, or do you want me to follow up, or
whatever you want to do? I'm easy. Or maybe Bob goes next and corrects what I say, and then.
Yeah.
Do folks have questions?
And sorry, everybody, I just received a phone call. I was expecting about a delivery tomorrow. So that's why Sue, it certainly wasn't anything you said. Everything you said was fascinating.
So I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Don. I don't know where he is exactly, but like he was one of the instigators of this sort of me inviting you to, and his framing was he wants war stories. What's the most challenging aspect of this? It sounds like it's been actually quite pleasant for you. So
well, it was hard. The hard part for me was that I don't know anything about furnaces. And so when the guys come, you say, oh yeah, and they know about furnaces, and they tell you thus and so. The luck for me was that I had a connection at the city, an engineer at the city, who was interested in heat pumps, and he was my Sherpa, really. He reassured me that I wasn't going to go broke if I put it in. And the hard part is to say to the furnace guys, no, don't. We're not going to do that here. And then they get invented, and then they start getting really interested. The crew that came in loved to do it. I mean, they were just having the best time because they'd never done one. So I don't know how many, I mean, maybe Bob knows, but I got the impression from Belia. Belia is the Mitsubishi representative, or one of them. And I think they've put in less than 10 Stuba heat pumps. I got the top of the line is the other thing. I mean, I think there may be cheaper units around. And I think it was the thing that I learned from it was, if you have an old system and you really want to even consider this, you have to plan ahead. And the hard part is to say, well, I've got something that's working. What should I do? Well, you need the plan. You need to have the plan. You need them to have looked at your house. If it's the middle of winter and your furnace just died, and you then have to say, I really would like and source and this and this and this and this, then you're in trouble, because you're not going to be able to do it in a whip fashion. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that, but there was enough fiddling go on that I had to have them come. I had to convince them what I wanted. I had to get them to start to get with the program. There had to be a survey of the house, because it's different technology. It's easy replacing like with like, because it's a unit and it just slots in and the other one goes out and this one goes in. This is a little different. Now, it may be different if you're going to use the units that are suspended from your wall inside the house, rather than go with your central system. That's a bit easier. Probably, is it easier, Bob? Do you think?
Yes, it is, but there are some drawbacks.
Yeah. I didn't find it awful. I mean, I really didn't. I found it exciting, actually. I found it a good story. I used to be a journalist in my youth, and I just thought it was a really interesting thing to do.
Cool, excellent. I see that there was a question from Dawn. Thank you, Sue. There was a question from Dawn a little earlier on, and then there are a few questions from Natalie. So how about if we address Dawn's question, and then Natalie, if you want to unmute and you could ask your questions yourself, if that's okay. And then we'll make sure we keep a little bit of an eye on the time so that we have time to move on. Yeah, we're still good for time. So Dawn, what was your question? You're muted.
Thank you very much, Sue, for coming in and telling your story.
Oh, I'm thrilled.
When Sarah and I started talking about asking someone to come in who's actually been through it, I was expecting a real war story of this was hell. And it sounds like you didn't go through hell at all, but no. It also sounds like you had extraordinary support, really extraordinary support. You had many people with a great deal of expertise who could help you pretty well every step of the way, it sounds like. And
right.
That's not a criticism, it's just an observation of that at the moment, maybe this is what it takes. I don't know.
Well, the thing though, Dawn, is that and it's interesting to meet with a group like yours. And there are, I suspect there are hundreds of these groups in town doing little different bits of the climate thing, right? And what happens though is there are networks. What you get is a network that's supportive. I had the extra advantage of the city guys. But I'm now in a position, and Bob's in a position, and we can help you. And Sarah's company is, I mean, it's a fabulous. They know the whole thing, and we're filling that gap of the system support for homeowners to be able to do this, because homeowners don't want to spend time. I actually didn't spend that much time. I mean, it was more pushing, and then Rudy came to the house, and then Rudy went away, and then Jameson came to the house, and then I had the 2 quotes, and then I kind of relied on the city engineer who'd been through it all. And he said, this is good. And then on our committee, we have the Net Zero Committee, we have an engineer and an architect. And I think all our little groups are the people that in communities are going to be the people that give the confidence to others to do things. I can't tell you, I mean, I felt badly that you all had boilers. I mean, I think boilers are wonderful, but I felt that I wasn't going to be able to help you as much as I would like to. But then Bob's here, he knows all about boilers. And if you came to Sarah and said, I've got boilers and problem, she'll say, oh, I know all about that. I can connect you with someone. And that's exactly the early stage of this before it becomes the only option you have, which will come, right? When the government says thou shalt not, no more of those, then what you rely on is the community. And there's tremendous strength in the community. And once you put something in, people come and they look at it and they say, oh, who'd you get that from? How did it work? What did it cost?
May I ask, I don't know if this, and this is my last question. I don't know if we wanted to go into this right now, but I know like Carmel and I, my partner and I had a conversation about what we want to do. And the cost of things, like, you know, what does it cost? What do the various things cost is a really important part of this conversation. Please don't go back over everything now, but I think, you know, at some point in our conversations to understand what it is that we're talking about, that the cost factor is
okay. I think what's going to happen on the cost, just let me address that for a sec.
Okay.
On the cost, the government is going to, I think, deal with the delta. I think the feds are going to subsidize heat pumps so that the playing field is even. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble because not everybody is cuckoo like me. You know, line of credit, here we go on my line of credit again. And then it eventually comes down sometimes. So I think and they were talking about $5,000 at what I heard the number 5,000. That's about the delta. That's about the difference. And then the difference is you're out of there. You're not in the league that's going to poison the planet anymore. It's over. It's over. You're cool. You just got your vaccination against climate change.
Oh, nice metaphor. Very nice.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if maybe in terms of costs, that might be something that you and Sarah can put together, just and write down at some point, just approximately to answer that question for John. And then in interest of time, have Natalie ask a few other questions, and then we'll try to make sure that we switch over to Bob at 8, if that's okay, just to make sure that we all get to hear everything we have to share. Does that sound okay? So Natalie, can you please unmute and ask the questions rather than me read them out of the chat room? Just please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sue, would it be better if I asked all the questions up front, or do you want them one at a time? And they're also
whatever you want to do.
Okay, I'll go in order of what you talked about. So you said you would need a gas top up initially, but then it sounds like you didn't want to go for that. So how did you get around that piece?
There are electric units. And so you go electric on the heat pump and then an electric top up. And it's never, to my knowledge, it hasn't worked this winter at all.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not even sure how I would know whether it worked because it's internal to the black box in the basement. It's the Ferrari. I call it the Ferrari in the basement.
Okay. Okay. Thanks so much. I had a couple of questions about the contractors. So you said you worked with Belia Brothers and you had another quote. I'm curious who you worked with at Ballier Brothers and who gave you the other quote, and how did you find those folks?
Well, Atlas was looking after my furnace and had been for quite a long time, like 10 years or something. And I was happy with them. Bellier had been had been a finalist in our selection of furnace provider for the Harvard Village home retrofit project in 2010. And I liked the look of them, and they had the Mitsubishi machine. And that was clearly the top of the line of the machines. And so I just called Bellier, and when we're for a neighborhood project, what you do is call, and you don't say you're from a neighborhood project. You just say you're Joe Blow and you want somebody to come and give you a quote. And then you know and what your residents might go through with the same thing. So I dealt with a young salesman called Jameson Murray, I think was his name, and he hadn't ever put in a heat pump before, but he was smart about it, and it's an interesting thing. It is very early days. You know, I got a note from them the other day saying that Mitsubishi wanted to talk to me about what the experience had been and how it all worked. And the note was from Philip, who runs Bellier or owns Bellier, Philip Graham. And I think it's very much like the solar panels, the start of the solar industry is what it felt like. And in my house, I was having hydro guys come in to see how solar panels worked. And they would look at it and say, oh, really? Is that how that? Well, it hasn't come on yet. I said, it takes 5 minutes. They said, oh, really? And they were trooping in and out of my house because I'm the first person to go on the grid in Toronto. And then I sell my power to the province. Doug Ford doesn't know that yet. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. I mean, I think you just say, I want the Atlas was using a different unit, different manufacturer. The prices were, I think, reasonably equivalent. I can't remember. I could get you those prices. Have you dealt on Sarah on different units?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's in the range. It costs more. That's all. Costs a bit more.
Yeah.
And you get out of guilt. You don't have to.
And what was Sarah's role and Goldfinch's role in your process?
Well, they came along a little later, and they've been just we've gone back and forth a lot, less with Sarah directly, but they've been very helpful as, again, a part of the community, I think, really. And in our net zero project, we wanted to have some audits done, energy assessments. And so Goldfinch was ready to do audits, and then they have the genius of the Goldfinch, if I'm allowed to give you a plug here, I think so, is they've decided to give homeowners a route map for, if you've got $10 to spare this year, this is what you could do on your house. These are the things that have to be done. These are the costs of the things that have to be done. This would be a route map to doing things. And one of the things that I did was I violated the city's thought. The city thought you have to basically do the retrofit first to get your energy costs down, and then you bring in the heat pump. And the problem is people will run out of cash before they can really address the big problem that they have in their basement. So I said, I don't care anymore about retrofits. I'm not doing that. I'll take the hit in order to get the fossil fuels out of my house. That's, but I'm not everybody, and I'm in a financial position where I can do it, sort of.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Just if I may interject as well, like as far as your question, Natalie, sort of how we helped Sue. Sue actually helped us. So Sue and Bob were some of the homeowners that we connected with, we being my business partner and I, back last spring when my friend Trish Long approached me with the idea of Goldfinch Energy. And so we started talking to homeowners who had done this, and so Sue and Bob, helped us get a better sense of what does it take, what are the various configurations, and that kind of thing. So you can attribute the success. And what we realized is the same thing that Sue said, is that the number of people who get across the line as far as going all the way with the retrofits that they want, it's low, because people get tripped up based on like technical challenges that they don't have answers to, based on costs that they don't realize there are other alternatives, that people don't spend the time to kind of work through and think through the complexities of the and the nuances of everyone's home. So I'm not trying to do a plug, but just like that's the reality of the situation that I saw anyway, and that I think Sue and Bob can speak to.
No.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's a hard go, because we found in the Hero project, our home energy retrofit project, you have to give people a notion that they're gonna get a little save a little money. And we got some city money, which we used to pay for the energy assessments. And then what we were getting is we got quotes from the furnace companies. So if you went with, maybe that's how we got Atlas. I think Atlas was the furnace supplier on that project. What happened was residents would then take that as a baseline and go out into the market and try to negotiate a lower price from somebody else. And so we weren't able at the end of the day to really know what exact impact that program had, because not all people stayed in the program to the end, where you could get your energy assessment, and the city is now mandating, or about to mandate, each house is going to have an energy audit, so that when you buy a house, you know what its rating is, what has to be done. And that's, the more stuff that's mandatory, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is just nuts that you sit and burn fossil fuels and don't say anything about it. It's just crazy.
No. Yeah, good points. Good points.
I mean, they could put them in if the delta is 5,000. You say, okay, well, we'll forgive you taxes for 5,000, and we'll gradually increase your taxes a % a year or something for 25 years, and we'll get the money back. And the city is at the moment, the city's broke, so they're looking at giving loans. Well, I don't know why you'd have to go through the mess of getting a city loan. You can go to the bank and get a loan for zip interest. I mean, if there's a time to do it, it's now.
Yeah,
right?
no, again, good point. And that gets into a whole other conversation that,
I'm sure.
that hopefully we will have in the future. I would gently, Sue, thank you so much.
No, I'm cool. I'm staying. I want to hear what Bob.
Yeah, no, I hope you are. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that Bob had a chance. So Sarah, unless you have anything that you'd like to say.
I would like to introduce Bob, if that's okay.
Sure.
He
Go.
deserves an introduction as well. I know him a bit better than Sue. I apologize. My business partner and Sue have had more interactions. And Bob, just as Sue came, we got to know him last spring as we were figuring out Goldfinch Energy and have had a series of lovely conversations. He's had me up on his roof to check out his solar panels, and he not only is a homeowner in Etobicoke who's also done exceptional things with his home to reduce his gas consumption, he also has a ton of interesting background and experience. So for a number of decades, he owned one of the largest carrier HVAC dealer, and he's also consulted on the Ontario Building Code. He's founding director of Sustainable Buildings Canada. He's consulted on the energy audit program that Sue was speaking about, and I'm sure I'm missing a number of things. Advisor to the water heater division of the Canadian Institute of Plumbing and Heating. So anyway, he's obviously an atypical homeowner, but regardless, as a result, I guess it's very interesting to hear his perspectives as well. Just as Sue is very passionate and motivated about getting off of gas, Bob too. And I'll turn it over to you, Bob. Although, would you like me to share my screen and share the presentation?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, just give me a moment. Host. Oh, Kathy, if you're the host, can you enable screen sharing? I should have asked you in advance.
That's okay. I'm just trying to remember where I
It was disabled because the button was well.
If I want to make, if I make you a co-host.
That works too, probably.
Yeah. So let me just see.
Just while they're working that out, I'll give you a little bit of background. I'm a mechanical engineer. When I graduated from U of T in 1961, my thesis was on collecting heat from the sun. My father and mother started an oil furnace service business in 1934, which was called Atlas Service Company. In the summer of 1967, my father was not well, and he challenged me to take over his business. I had just come back from 9 months in Europe, and I couldn't find a reason not to accept his challenge. So I took over Atlas Service Company. I immediately changed it to Atlas Air Conditioning Company, and it is now called Atlas Care. And just out of interest, Sue, Rudy is somebody I hired back when I had Atlas Air Conditioning. This project on my own house is one that I'd been planning for quite a while. I sold Atlas Air in 1986, and I almost immediately became a consulting engineer on energy efficiency in buildings, and also housing. I did a lot of work with Enercan on the R2000 program. So my house is a 2-story house in Etobicoke, in Markland Wood. It faces almost due south. It has a flat roof. It's about 1,850 square feet. I did have an energy audit done, and these were the numbers that it produced. I was a bit disappointed in my air leakage because, in fact, I had the house air sealed in about 1985, I guess. However, that's a long time ago. And the next slide, thanks, Sarah. So I have a bad habit of doing things for myself. So in 2007, after I had sold Atlas Air, I installed a carrier high efficiency gas furnace and a 2.5-ton air conditioning unit. My humidifier was an April Air, and if you have a bypass drum type humidifier, you will know what it's like providing the annual service, or you may have somebody do it. I also put in a domestic hot water, gas water heater. But the one thing that is unusual is that I knew as soon as I moved into the house that it could be divided into 3 zones. The duct system was such that there was a separate duct running to the 2nd floor to provide heating and air conditioning to the 2nd floor. And the main floor and basement could be divided into a south zone and a north zone. And so I did this at the time. And it's a great system and I love it. Each zone can have its own schedule and temperatures. So for instance, in the summer, since my wife and I don't use the top floor, we let the temperature drift up. Then after 7 o'clock, when electrical rates drop down, we'll pull the temperature down to a normal temperature for sleeping or comfortable temperature for sleeping. Next. So I had been, I worked with Mitsubishi, and in fact, the owner of MITS-AIR, the Ontario distributor, was a competitor of mine back when I had Atlas Air Conditioning. Yeah. So I had pretty much decided that I wanted a Mitsubishi Zuba Central. It is a cold climate heat pump, air source heat pump. I should tell you that when I had Atlas Air Conditioning, I put my first air source heat pump into a customer's house in 1968. And if you go to about 1979, the government of Canada came out with the Canadian Off Oil program, which offered about $900 to anybody if they got off oil. But one way that was acceptable was adding an air source heat pump. And I probably put in 500 to 700 of those during that period. It was a great program from a business point of view. So when I talked to MITS-AIR, the distributor, the sales manager, Tony Chami, and I told him what I'd done and my background, and he said to me, well, why don't you install it yourself? And I decided I would. That's an affliction I have, doing things by myself. But I also knew that I wanted to keep the carrier zone control system, and that I would not be able to go to just anybody and say, okay, marry my zone control system to the Mitsubishi system. The offshore heat pump controls and even their air conditioning units are totally digital, whereas the North American ones are still analog. So I had to work that out, but in fact, it was easier than I thought because of some of the operating characteristics of the Mitsubishi heat pump. I had known the sales and marketing manager of Weil McLean, I don't know, for 40 years. I knew him when he first came into the industry in the mid-70s, and they are a very reliable boiler. And I did not want to go the full all-electric option. Partly because of operating costs, and I'll show you about operating costs a little bit later on. So I did install a Weil McLean condensing boiler, and it provides the auxiliary heat. So you talked about an electric heater in your indoor unit. I have a hydronic coil, and it is carefully sized, and I did this myself, so that the return water temperature from the coil when auxiliary heat is being provided is low enough that the boiler operates in condensing mode. And that's the difference between having an operating efficiency of about 76 to 78%, and this is thermal efficiency, versus 95 to 96%. So I had Atlas Care install the boiler. I knew that Weil McLean was a product that they specialized in, so I had them install it. Okay, next slide. Thanks. This is what it looks like. Sue, you talked about the vertical shape of the Mitsubishi unit. And that's the one on the left, the outdoor unit. It's very quiet. I'll tell you a brief story. When I was down at the General Electric, I was a GE heat pump dealer, as well as a Westinghouse heat pump dealer. And I was down at the factory in Louisville, Kentucky, and the fellow taking us on the tour pointed out a Japanese-made version of the GE heat pump. And he said, it's very, very quiet, much quieter than our standard. And when you look at the fan, the propeller fan, it has a very long tail on the blades. And the Mitsubishi has that, and the outdoor unit, and it is very quiet. The one on the right-hand side is the indoor unit. They are interconnected by 2 refrigerant lines. But the Zuba Central has about 3 changes to the refrigerant cycle that are patented. And I think, therefore, that it may be, pardon me, untouchable when it comes to capability at cold outdoor temperatures. And Sue, as you've experienced and as I've experienced, the system requires very little auxiliary heat. And I'm not sure that auxiliary heat has been on in my system at all this winter. Next slide. Some other changes in 2020, after I had the heat pump installed and the boiler installed, I had a company called Heliotechnique install a 7.6 kilowatt solar PV system. Now that's a fairly big system.
You bet.
Yeah, when you negotiate with Toronto Hydro, when you enter into a net metering agreement, you can sell electricity to them, but you can't sell them any more in 12 months than you buy from them. And so I did a very careful analysis of, at first they said, oh, well, we looked at your historical electricity use, you can get up to 3.6 kilowatts. And I said, well, I'm putting in an air source heat pump, and I projected the difference in my consumption. And so they granted me 7.6 kilowatts. The solar PV system started up January 29th. I should tell you that I installed the Mitsubishi heat pump in the first week of August 2018, and Atlas Care installed the boiler for auxiliary heat in the first week of December 2018. So next slide. That is the layout of the solar PV system. There's a total of 25 panels. There's 9 on and the front of the house is down in the right lower corner, and the back of the house is in the left upper corner. We have a skylight, which was one of the first changes I made when we moved into the house in 1979. Because the hallway, the center hallway, was very dark, and I had to have a new roof put on. 2 chimneys, most of which the one to the top right corner was the chimney for the gas furnace of many years. The 2, and you can't make them out, but the 2 down in the lower left side are 2 fireplaces, one in the basement, one on the main floor. And many years ago, I bought a damper that I installed on the top of the living room flue with a cable that runs down through a pulley, and I can open and close that damper. The other one, we don't use the fireplace in the recreation room. So this is 1 year's worth of output from the solar photovoltaic system. That's gross output in the green, the upper part. And then the amount that we've sold to Toronto Hydro in the pink. So I view sales as negative. It's actually positive in many respects. But the solar electricity we generate is quite significant. And as you can see, I'm not sure if you can see it at the bottom, but 1 year's worth of electricity generation by the solar system was 9,574 kilowatt hours. Back before we had the heat pump, we used to use about 8,500 kilowatt hours a year. So it does generate more than our normal use before the heat pump. Next slide. So here's 1 year's worth of operation, comparing 2021, because I didn't have the solar PV running until the end of January, and I didn't have the net meter running until middle of February last year. So I've put together a year's worth of data using January and February of 2021 and March through to December of 2020. So you can see the natural gas consumption in cubic meters a year has dropped from almost 2,400 down to 554. The electricity purchased has gone up, but not markedly. The amount of electricity sold is 6,721 kilowatt hours. Now, one of the beauties of generating electricity by solar is that with the time of use rate system that our electricity is sold to us at, it's all generated, at least during the week, either on peak, the most expensive rate. And I get, by the way, with a net meter, you get paid exactly the same amount for every kilowatt hour you sell to Toronto Hydro as you pay to buy it. So solar PV is generated mostly on peak during the week and off peak on the weekends. All electricity is costs the off peak rate on the weekend, no matter what the time of day. So the net electricity purchased, as you can see, fell from 5,781 kilowatt hours a year. I overestimated when I mentioned the number before, down to 1,201. And I think it will be lower in future. Don't hold me to it. But the key thing, the key issue, and the reason that I did all this was the emissions. Now, I know a lot about emissions of both natural gas and electricity. And electricity is not totally emissions-free in Ontario. So that's why you'll see 264 tons, or rather kilograms per year from the electricity that I use, even though most people will tell you, oh, electricity is green, it's zero emissions. Well, unfortunately, our electrical system burns natural gas in gas turbines for peaking and sometimes for base load. And I will tell you that our present government, and there are, I just check this out for a paper that I put in our Marklander newsletter, and which is on a website. All the papers that I've written over the last 14 months are on our website. And I'll give you that link if you want. But you can see that the total CO2 emissions in kilograms per year from 2017, when I had a gas furnace and a conventional gas water heater, 5,826 kilograms. And with the heat pump, 1,316, it's a 77% reduction. So I did not set out to get to zero emissions, but I did set out to make a very significant reduction. And that's my goal. And one last slide, and I'm very satisfied with the goal. When we talk about cost, and this is costs, energy costs, this is a summary of the electricity rates starting in January of, or rather February of 2020. It has changed 5 times through the year, as our government, to their credit, have attempted to give us all, both small business and homeowners, a break. So whilst rate 1, which prevailed for at least a couple of years before 2020, on peak was 20.8 cents a kilowatt hour, mid peak was 14.4, and off peak was 10.1 cents. And that was true in February and March. The rate then dropped to 10.1 cents no matter what period. They upped it again, don't ask me why, in June, July, August, September, probably because we are a summer peaking utility, and it does cost the Ontario Power Generation and other generators a little more. So it went to 12.8 cents. For some reason, I think they thought that the pandemic was over, so they went to 21.7 cents, 15 cents and 10.5 cents in November and December, but they introduced an Ontario electricity rebate. So you'll see it on your bill. I think it amounts to, I don't know how they calculate it, but it's, for me, it's about $40 to $50 a month. And then in January and February of this year, they settled on 8.5 cents across the board. So now, from my point of view, since I'm generating electricity, it means I'm not getting paid as much, but I'm not crying about it. I applaud the government for taking this step. Unfortunately, it means that there will be increased debt placed on the Ontario Electricity Finance Corporation, which was created when the electricity system was deregulated. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bob. That's amazing, and it's amazing to hear this news and be informed of these things and in such detail. It's much appreciated. I know someone had put in the chat, you mentioned a newsletter, Marklander newsletter?
Okay, that is, the website is sustainablemw.ca, Sustainable Markland Wood, but shortened and there's no hyphen in it. It's just sustainablemw.ca. I'm a little behind, but I will have it right up to date by Monday. My most recent articles, has anybody heard of deep lake water cooling?
Yep.
Well, my latest article is deep lake water cooling and the man who led its development, who I got to work with very closely during some of that period. So I've written a story about that. The previous 2 articles were on Ontario's electricity system generation, part 1, and consumption, part 2. So they're somewhat technical, but you're most welcome to download them.
It's very interesting to watch. I have a half of Bob's system on my rooftop. What's interesting to me is the deep water cooling takes water out of Lake Ontario and does some magic with it. And the U of T campus is full of it now. And they've just put in a huge geothermal field. And the Robert Street field is within my residence association area. And we tried to get geothermal in there. And I sit on the planning committee of my neighborhood association. We're trying to get developers to put in geothermal because it's a really no-brainer solution to everything. But I have Bullfrog Power, which is a way of getting green power to my house. And they subsidize hydro and they do some investment of green power choices. I think it's going to come down to a kind of a selection of things, a kind of table offering. You know, you've seen what Bob's system is really elegant. I'm just a patchwork. I've got a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of something else. And all of it counts. And it's terrific to see those numbers, Bob. It's the best.
Thanks.
Mm,
Bob,
yeah,
you were going to respond?
Yes,
Go ahead, Bob. And thanks, Sue.
I simply wanted to comment on the discussion, Sue, that you led and others with questions about how to get help to plan what to do to move your house to a lower carbon footprint and a more comfortable house and so on. And that is, first of all, Transform TO has been working on that, and they have launched a program with a couple of speakers that was put together by, but it's a ton of data, and I spent a lot of my career on efficiency standards for a host of equipment. It is highly technical, and that's where I think Trish and Sarah at Goldfinch Energy have come up with an approach that is exactly what most homeowners need. They will produce a map of steps after they do an energy audit of the house that will provide costs and I think estimated savings. And so that's why I've been very pleased to work with them.
Well, and also identifying the suppliers, you know, when you go into it, I think to go back to Dawn's question to me, the hard part is that if I hadn't had the pals and Bob helped me, I mean, I didn't even know Bob. I hardly know Bob now, except I admire him from afar. No, but I mean, there was a question and Trish said, I'll talk to Bob. And Bob came back with the answer and it was, you know, but I think it's going to be neighbors helping neighbors. And the question is, if you have the notion of being a pioneer, if I hadn't done it in Harvard Village, there'd be no heat pump here at all. Nobody would have anything to go and look at. So it would be somebody coming and saying, oh, there's this magic system and blah, blah. And you'd say, well, it's the new system. Does it work? I mean, you see the same thing with vaccine hesitancy, where rational people say, oh my God, you know, how am I going to do that? And so some of us have gone ahead And I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about it because it's terrific. It's just terrific. And I may take a hit next year on the when the hydro rates go up. I'll take a bit more of a hit than I did this year. But then the carbon tax is being ratified. So the carbon tax is going to figure into the equation on what the running costs are going to be. So it sounds daunting, but it's really pretty easy, and it's pretty friendly when it comes down to it. You know, you can phone somebody up and say, hey, did you do that? Oh yeah. And the ones that go first are really happy to talk about it. You know, because they feel good about what they did.
Excellent. Thank you. I see a couple of questions. There's one question from Natalie saying, what refrigerants, I guess this is a question directed to what Bob has presented. What refrigerants are used in these systems?
The current refrigerant is R410A. Now, when I was in the business, I dealt with two refrigerants, R22 and R12. And then the hole in the ozone layer over the North Pole arose, and the damage that refrigerants were causing to the ozone layer became a major issue around the world. And the industry has responded strongly. I'll be frank with you, back when I was in the business, we just blew refrigerant off into the air. There was no recognition of the damage it did to the ozone layer. That is totally over. And then the examination of what's called the ozone depletion potential of refrigerants came into being in R12, which was the common refrigerant for medium and low temperature applications, which is not air conditioning. For instance, supermarkets are a medium and low temperature application. It was recognized that R12 had a very high ozone depletion potential. So it's virtually unused now. And even R22 wasn't as bad, but it also damaged the ozone layer. And so R22 is used much less now. Carbon dioxide, which was used as a refrigerant back in the 30s, has come on strong, especially for low and medium temperature applications. It operates at a significantly higher pressure, but many supermarkets are changing over, at least when they build new stores, they are building them to use carbon dioxide as the refrigerant. And it, yes, it blows off into the atmosphere. And since it was taken from the atmosphere anyway or mostly to have carbon dioxide available, the problem or the cause towards climate change can be considered as zero. I don't know if you knew that burning wood is considered zero, because when trees grow, they absorb carbon dioxide all the time. And when you cut them down and burn them, they give off carbon dioxide. That is considered net zero in terms of CO2 emissions. So it's an interesting question. I'm intrigued that you would ask it. But R410A is one of the newer refrigerants. It operates at a higher pressure and therefore requires thicker pipes with thicker walls. And when I installed my own system, I had to get some new equipment to deal with that. But R410A is now one of the standard refrigerants for air conditioning.
On the solar hot water, it's used with vegetable grade glycol.
Yes, that's a heat transfer fluid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because it's a straight heat transfer, nothing else is happening.
Yes.
And there's one more question regarding R410A from Natalie. Will R410A have to be phased out with the Kigali Accord that phases HFCs because they are among the top GHGs? I hope I phrased that correctly, Natalie.
I don't have the answer, but ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, is a leads in the rating of refrigerants and their ozone depletion potential. So I can probably look it up, Natalie, if you really want to know.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is that in the drawdown book, is that mirrored? I don't know if you can you see
Yep.
that? Is it backwards?
Yep.
No, it's
Yep.
good.
Okay, in the drawdown book, the number one climate change solution that they have, according to their math and modeling, is refrigeration. And they talk about HFCs needing to be phased out through an amendment to the Montreal Protocol. And from what so there's a Kigali agreement. And that starts with phasing HFCs out in 2019. And as far as I understand, R410A is one of the HFCs that needs to be phased out. So I'm a little bit, but my concern is, if we're putting in new systems, and I'm still quite confused about this, I'm really just trying to understand. But it seems to me, from the little that I do understand, that we're putting in new systems to replace the gas, but we're putting in these systems that have refrigerants that are actually one of the top greenhouse gases, much more intense than gas. So I'm kind of missing the technical knowledge, but I think I have a question that's worth asking.
Well, each change in refrigerants does help reduce the damage to the ozone layer. And there have been a number, as I say, R12, which prevailed when I owned Atlas Air Conditioning, is gone. R20.
I'm sorry, but I'm not talking about the ozone layer, because these refrigerants like R410A was brought in as a replacement for the refrigerants that were so damaging to the ozone layer. But it turns out that those refrigerants that were brought in really contribute to climate change. They're among the top contributors.
Well, the way that refrigerants are referred to in terms of the damage is damaging the ozone layer, which does cause climate change. It allows more heat to come in and to be stored. So I can look up the ozone depletion potential, which is the rating on refrigerants. I think that, yes, there has been, for, let's call it 50 years, a progress in moving to refrigerants that cause less damage. And I'm pretty sure that R410A causes less than R22 did. And I think less than many others. You may or may not know that your car, if you go back to the 60s, 1960s or 70s, used to use R12 as a refrigerant. And of course, cars also used to leak refrigerant. Today, they are R134A, but even that is being phased out. That came in the 70s or 80s, I guess. So it's a continual step to move to refrigerants. And this is why, one reason why the supermarkets are moving to CO2. It's distinctly more expensive for them because the equipment must be more ruggedly built, but it is actually more energy efficient as it happens. Again, however, the whole industry, including the automotive repair shops and the air conditioning service companies, and has changed from simply blowing the refrigerant off into the atmosphere to capturing it and returning it for recycling. So it's a very different issue today because there's not nearly the amount of those refrigerants being shot off into the atmosphere. They are recaptured and recycled.
Can I just mention one of the things that we didn't cover is that the heat pump cools in the summer and heats in the winter. So it replaces both air conditioning and furnace.
Yes.
So what you're doing is you're getting a one-stop shop on your HVAC systems in the house. The other thing which would horrify you is I used to be in the television business, and we used to have Freon fights in the videotape editing suites, and we would have them in bottles and squirt them around, and they would, when I think of it, anyway, the penguins were getting cataracts and things because of our VTR Freon fights.
Okay, well, glad we've moved past that type of fighting. There's a couple more questions that I just want to bring because we're coming to the last 15 minutes of our time. There's a question, here it is, talking about geothermal, and Bob, the question is, can you tell me the minimum clearance required between horizontal underground piping?
No, I can't. But
Ding, ding, ding. Fair enough.
I can talk.
You need space though, eh? You need a fair bit. I watched the U of T put in their system, and I don't know, the pipes are a couple of the spigots are, I don't, maybe, or the bore holes, a couple of feet apart, maybe.
I think a little more
and
than,
that's on a vertical system.
yeah, I think a little more than that, but I jumped into the geothermal business in about 1979. I didn't stay with it. And quite frankly, at least for your own home, these cold climate air source heat pumps, and I particularly cite Mitsubishi, do almost as good a job, and I would argue probably don't remove the justification for going to geothermal. Now, I think it was your neighborhood, Sue, that did a study on changing the whole community to geothermal.
Well, it was our engineer was over on Laurier Street. The problem with doing geothermal is you need the whole street to go to really justify, pretty much.
Yep.
Or you could do 2 houses at a time, and I think the price is around $30,000 a house, or in that vicinity. And there are isolated locations for geothermal in laneways. They put in a laneway at a Travelers Hotel down on College Street.
Yes, they did.
And it's and there was one that was in Palmerston area, went in. I went over and looked at it. It says muddy and mucky a process as you get on a drill rig. You know, it's a very slick, messy, lots of liquid stuff. And the problem I had, I would have done. I was originally thinking I should do geothermal, but I have probably my lot is 120 feet deep. The back lane where I would put it, I have a fish pond. So they're going to have to torpedo under the fish pond or through the fish pond, or and birch trees, and I have existing vegetation. So I think, well, that isn't really gonna work. And my neighbor and I talked about it, but It's difficult. It would, and if you have a combined system with people, what you want is a utility to come in and to lay in the whole street. On Laurier, they got a buy-in from a single block street, both sides. And unfortunately, by the time they were ready to put in the pipes and to drill, people's furnaces had died. You know, one of the really difficult parts of dealing with climate change is every time I hear of somebody replacing their furnace with gas, I think that's 20 years. You've committed to using gas for 15 or 20 years. And it's so wrong when you can do something else for really not that much more money. It's frustrating, and I'm trying to get our net zero committee to say, you know, get off the duff, at least get the information out there that if you have an old furnace, let's get you signed on to a program so at least you could make a decision on it. At least you could have the plans, you could get the quotes, you'd be ready to install if it comes to it. And then if it doesn't, if you decide not to do it, then you just go back and throw in another gas furnace. But it's 15 years of no change, and we really, on an individual basis, can't afford that. I don't think.
Very true. Very true. We have a question from Nick about, is there a list of suppliers you would recommend, including Sarah?
Well, I'd certainly recommend Sarah and Trish, and they have contacts up the wazoo. We're not in a position yet to, we haven't gone out to an RFP. We're doing quite a detailed survey now to try to identify what opportunities actually we have in the community by going to the community saying, where are you at? What are you thinking? What sort of money are you wanting to do stuff? And my memory is around a third of houses are prime for furnace replacement. And so, you know, when the time comes, I'm going to push our guys to really advance that in a way. The other thing is, I found no problem dealing with Mitsubishi and with Atlas. With the Atlas Care guys were great, but they didn't have the Mitsubishi. And every time I turn around, it's Mitsubishi. And did you know so-and-so got a Mitsubishi? Mark Cullen, the gardener, just got a Mitsubishi put in. So it's quite the jungle drums are saying, yeah, that's the system. That's the real system. And if you think about it, I've managed to compete with gas despite the price differential in gas. So if it's been, and Bob can correct me if my mathematical thinking is wrong, it's been net no difference between running a gas furnace and running an electrical heat pump. The cost of gas is way higher. So it has to mean that the cost per unit of energy has to be substantially lower on the heat pump than gas. Am I right in thinking that? I think I am.
Well, if
the running cost is exactly the same, and you've got the actual unit cost of the electrical versus gas is markedly different, which we know it is, then the machine has to be very, very efficient.
Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, only that electricity, as I noted on the last slide, has been much cheaper for the last 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
And so it makes it difficult to to
gauge, yeah.
which is cheaper, but fundamentally in cost per unit of energy, gas is dramatically cheaper. However, the heat pump takes heat from the outdoor air and puts it inside the house. That's free heat, other than the cost of the refrigeration system running to make that happen. I mean, the simple analogy for a heat pump is, think of your household refrigerator. It takes heat from inside the refrigerator where it's cold and puts it out into the kitchen where it's warm. And that's what a heat pump does. It's also what an air conditioner does. But the industry has settled on the term heat pump to mean a refrigeration cycle that can reverse, so that it can be providing heat from outdoors where it's cool to inside the house where it's warm in winter. And then in summer, it can take heat from inside the house where it's cooler and put it outside where it's warmer. So the industry term for heat pump is ability to reverse cycle, but your refrigerator can also be viewed as a heat pump.
Cool, thank you. There's one, thank you. There was one more question. I realized though we're like 6 minutes away, and it's been a very full and enlightening discussion. John, you had mentioned a question, but unless you have a burning desire, or you can ask it in a very specific way in our last few minutes, I would be tempted to start to come to a denouement for the evening. But also,
I'll pass, because my question is a whole new area of boilers and solar hot water. And
Solar hot water is great. Do it in a minute, in a nanosecond. It's
go.
fabulous.
Oops.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. Talk to Trish and Sarah about solar hot water. It's endless showers, you know, with an on-demand heater.
You're saying I need a shower.
No.
Yeah.
We probably all need showers.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that anyone would like to just add in a closing remark? Maybe, and actually, I'll still keep recording, but I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna go to gallery view. So there you are. There. Does anyone have a final comment to add? Okay. Oh, there's one new message. No, thank you. I was going to say too, like, thank you. First, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for assembling, asking Bob and Sue to come and speak to us. It was amazing, very informative, and to hear how the different experiences and different, the way each of them approached what they were going to do, and how the two stories sometimes intertwined or dovetailed. But yeah, it was amazing to listen to this conversation. And there was
it was amazing for me, because I've never seen Bob's full pitch, and having done what I've done, I see that I've come out with pretty much the same script as he has, and it's great. You'd say it's great, eh, Bob? It's been a ride. It's been a ride. It's neat. It's neat.
And I also thank both of you, Bob and Sue, for what you're saying about the importance. Really, you have been community leaders by taking the time, doing the work, doing the research, doing the planning, and showing your community and everybody that it's possible. These things are possible. So that in and of itself is extremely inspiring. So thank you so much to both of you for coming to talk.
Well, it's been great. You know, you guys are fabulous. I mean, the questions are fabulous, but the fact that you've spent a couple of hours with oldsters like Bob and I, it's just amazing. It's very encouraging, and more power to you. And one of the things that we tried to do, we tried to get a federal grant to engage residents associations across the country in doing climate change stuff. And there's a movement. If we could stitch it together, there'd be a huge movement that would say, okay, let's everybody do this and let's sort this out. And you could do bulk buys, and you could really make a big difference. But Trish and Sarah are where the rubber hits the road. They're doing it every day, and inventive. They're inventive, and the reviews we got back from our residents who'd had energy audits done by them were that they were fabulous.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's not bad at all. Anyway, look forward to hearing from you and how you do, and I wish you luck. It's fun. Bellier, Goldwater Solar is my hot water solar, and my PV. He's doing my PV now, the photovoltaic. It's neat.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah, do you have anything to add before we go with a one-word checkout?
No, Sue and Bob said it all. I was happy to sit back and have them share. Don, I'm sorry you maybe didn't get the war stories you were hoping for, but maybe that's good. That shows you. I think hopefully what we heard tonight is some of the more positive stories that sometimes we need to hear, and I really appreciate both the vision that Sue and Bob have for all homeowners doing this, and for the leadership that they've taken. And so thank you, both of you, for sharing your experience, and hopefully there's some inspiration that came from this tonight.
Both ways.
Most excellent.
Right back at you guys.
So let's just try. We did this last week too. Let's just do a one-word checkout, and just say one word of like how you're feeling at this moment. Who would like to go first? And then pass it to somebody else that you see in the square.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, okay. Well, the word that comes to mind is exuberant. It's not quite grammatically correct, but it's just a really positive feeling and excitement with what's going on. I'll pass it back to you, Nick.
Inspired.
You guys.
Nick.
We're good. We're all good. We're all in together. Let's just.
Yeah.
It's a grand thing. It's a grand thing.
Nick, will you pass to
Don?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Sarah, for asking your friends, clients, colleagues to come in. I really, really appreciate this.
Yeah, that was great.
Unbelievable. Pieces are starting to fit together for me. We're not about to do anything because a bunch of reasons, but it's understanding how it all works. And also I have a role to play in the community. And I want to thank Sue, especially like one phrase that you said, which is that there are little groups everywhere. And it's the experience of these little groups that are helping each other and helping people who are just beginning to consider this process. And it's that organic web of people with different levels of experience reaching a hand out and giving others a hand up. And it seems that is how it's happening until at some point, we hope, the government kind of says, folks, that's the end. From now on, it's the future. By the way, today, the feds announced an enormous, I think it was $7 billion that they're giving to provinces and cities to help them deal with the shortfall from COVID. But that's a side thing, but I really appreciate you for helping me see the whole picture and how this works. Thank you, everyone.
Most excellent. How about over to Sarah? She's someone.
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about this stuff. So, and I never get tired of it. So, yeah, it was great to feel the energy. So I'm feeling energized.
Thank you. And call someone else who hasn't had a one word.
I can go.
Yeah.
It's much less daunting now. Like it's within the realm of possibility. Before it was just totally, I don't know, I couldn't comprehend anything, but now it's possible.
Excellent, Janet. Janet, you call the next person.
Oh, Natalie.
I'm feeling pensive. I still have a lot of questions because my system is not like the ones that you described. But I'm also very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie.
That was
pretty square.
Oh, who?
Rabia hasn't gone yet.
Rabia.
I learned a lot. Come away very inspired. Cindy and Lyle.
Well, Nicholas took our inspired word. So we've landed on optimistic.
And, yeah. And I just want to call into 3 words, picking up on Dawn's thing, where Sue had said neighbors helping neighbors. And I think that's the way of the future.
Well said.
Yeah, they can't stop us, you know. They really can't stop us that way. If the city does nothing, we're still here. And basically when the city says, oh, we're broke, you say, fine, we won't count on you for nothing. We'll do it ourselves.
Excellent. So now I think Bob and Nick and Sue.
Happy because I was able perhaps to help, but also I learned some things as well. Sorry, that's not one word.
And Nick.
I've already gone.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
I was inspired, still am.
Oh, you started. Yes. Sorry. Okay.
That's okay. So,
do you have?
Yeah, it's just great. It's just great, and there's the thing that you want to do is if you're lost, you can reach out to Trish and Sarah. If you're lost, you can reach out to Transform TO, get involved with them. Your neighborhood association, the Pocket out along the Danforth is one that's very active. Harvard Village is active. We're going to be reaching out, you know, and letting everybody participate. Whoever wants to come into our program can come in. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it. I mean, there are times you feel, oh, you know, this is, and then you say, if they're not going to be, I remember saying, well, after I met the Atlas Care guy, I said, there's not a bird going to die on my watch that I can help. Not one. So you try. Cool. And we've all been at it a long time, you know, but this is, maybe the time comes. Maybe the time comes that we can really turn the page on it. And the worry this time was that COVID came in and soaked up all, you know, energy and money but we just keep at it. Keep at it.
Yeah,
we will keep at it.
Another bit of inspiration was that David Suzuki said that every time they had gone to the governments, they said there was no money. There's no money. We don't have enough money. Well, now that they've done this with COVID and the money seems to have appeared miraculously, they can no longer say there's no money.
That's true. Okay, now listen, all friends, it's the end of the night. Thank you so much. Everybody stay well and come back next week. And thank you again, especially to Bob and Sue and Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
That was great.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.